Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Susan Coffin here for Attitude Magazine. I'm very, very pleased to have Dr. Sandy Newmark with us again. Dr. Newmark is a very well-known doctor in the field of integrative medicine. He is the founder of the Center for Pediatric Integrative Medicine in San Francisco and the author of a book that we highly recommend to you called ADHD Without Drugs, A Guide to Natural Care of Children in ADHD. His topic today is nutrition. He's also going to take some questions on supplements and vitamins, which I know a number of you have asked for more information about. So with that, thank you, Dr. Newmark, and let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody who is listening. The first thing I will say is that nutrition can really make a huge difference in the success of children with ADHD, and that's whether they're taking medications or they're not taking medications. I've seen time and time again in my practice where parents have found that simple nutritional changes like changing breakfast or sending school lunch can really, really make a difference, and we'll talk about the ways to do that soon. The second point I'd like to make is about artificial colors and flavors and preservatives, some preservatives. These actually, across the board, cause people to be more hyper and pay less attention. Studies have been done that show that even normal 3- and 4-year-olds, normal 8- and 9-year-olds, when they're given certain artificial colors and flavors, certain preservatives, will get more hyper and pay less attention. I think this is even more striking for some kids with ADHD. Of course, not everybody reacts the same way to everything. But we didn't evolve over hundreds of thousands of years to process these artificial colors and flavors that were invented 50 or 60 years ago, or even less. We evolved to process and make use of foods. So there's really no reason to eat these. So I recommend across the board getting rid of those artificial colors and flavors and as many preservatives as you can. There's just no reason for them to be in foods. In Europe, they actually have a warning label on products that have certain food colors saying this may make your child more hyperactive and inattentive.
Wow.
Yeah, we need that warning label here as well. An interesting sidelight is the ever-present Kraft macaroni and cheese in Europe has no artificial colors and flavors. Here
Is
in
that
the
true?
United States,
It exists?
yes.
Wow.
Yep. Here in the United States, they have artificial colors.
It's bright orange.
So, yeah. So I mean, they could easily make it without that, but they don't. So that's kind of a no-brainer for me. That's an across-the-board one. The next thing I'd like to mention is probably the most crucial concept is in nutrition for ADHD or anything else is the glycemic index, which is a measure of how fast carbohydrates are digested and turn into sugar. Now that's what carbohydrates are supposed to do. They're supposed to be digested and turn into sugar, glucose, which your whole body needs to work. Your brain works exclusively on glucose. So it's very, very important it does that. But how fast it does that is a major thing. When carbohydrates turn into sugar too fast, which happens with highly processed carbohydrates, say like white bread or waffles, that blood sugar goes up very quickly. This causes insulin and other hormones to be released into the body, which drops the blood sugar, often below normal, and then you have a hypoglycemic, stressed-out child and who is able to concentrate less well and work less well. And studies confirm this. So we'll talk a bunch about the glycemic index and how to deal with that. And as a corollary to that, breakfast is really important. I mean, this is what's getting the kid through the whole first half of school. And this child so often is eating food that just does not maintain, eating processed foods that cause the blood sugar to go up and then drop. And then pretty soon, halfway through the morning, we have a low glucose, low blood sugar child. Stress hormones are coming out, and things are not good. So a good breakfast is really simple. It should have some protein, some fat, which slows digestion of carbohydrates, and unprocessed low glycemic carbohydrate. So basically, as a parent, the main goal should be to transition a child with ADHD to a healthy diet, no matter what else you're doing, whether you're doing supplements, whether you're using medications, with behavioral things. All that is part of the whole treatment. But a healthy diet has to be part of it. And just finding easy, healthy recipes is not that hard with a little creativity and looking around. And we'll talk a little bit later probably about how to get your child to eat those things.
Yeah, there are a number of questions about that. Can we just back up for 1 second to the food dye issue? What are the top 5 egregious offenders that you see in kids' diets on the food dye front? I mean, mac and cheese, I can totally see on the list.
Okay, big one is Gatorade.
Oh, Gatorade. Interesting.
Every Gatorade, except there's one clear one, but almost all the Gatorades have artificial colors and flavors. Artificial colors, at least. So Gatorade is a huge one. As you said, mac and cheese is another one. Snacks are huge. Cheez-Its and all those kind of things.
Doritos and all those things.
Exactly. Doritos are a big one. And it's sad because the exact same kind of chips are available without food colors. So, it's not that they can't eat chips, and it's not that they can't eat macaroni and cheese. And then another big one is the preservatives in luncheon meats.
Oh.
Pastrami and
so hot dogs and bacon.
Those almost all have nitrites, which are not only not good for ADHD, but over the long run they cause cancer.
Okay.
So these are things that you really want to avoid.
So parents should read labels, and then I guess in terms of food colors and food dyes.
Parents should read labels. In my book, there's a whole section on the various preservatives and colorings and what they're called and what they look like. But basically, you got to read the label.
Okay.
The bottom line.
And probably what you're saying, I guess what you said is if you avoid processed food, then this issue goes away. So it's sort of
the less processed food there is, then the less labels you have to read, and it's also where you shop too. I mean, if you're able to find, say, a Trader Joe's near you, Trader Joe's is very good about having very few things that have preservatives. Not 100%, but 95% of the stuff they have do not have artificial colors and flavors, and so it makes your life easier. Of course, the places like Whole Foods don't either, but they tend to be more expensive.
My family
Trader Joe's everything we can at Trader Joe's and get the rest at Whole Foods.
The price difference is pretty striking. Okay, so starting with breakfast, one of the things that we hear from parents a lot is, 2 things regarding breakfast. One is their ADHD kids are really hard to wake up in the morning and get out the door. And, here's a specific example, but this is a common issue. My son's very sleepy in the morning, difficult to rouse, not hungry, and it's basically time to leave for school. And he really has no time to have anything much other than like a quick bowl of cereal. So suggestions for that sort of morning equivalent of the witching hour that includes good nutrition.
Sure. There's 2 things. Now, when you say no time for anything but a quick bowl of cereal, well, that could be a quick bowl of very healthy cereal.
Okay.
Why does it have to be a quick bowl of Choco Pops or something? It's not any harder or slower to give them a quick bowl of a good whole grain cereal with some milk is healthy. I mean, that's perfectly fine. Okay. And you could even throw some fruit in there. Okay, so that's one thing. I mean, even things that are fast can be healthy.
Okay.
Second thing is a healthy drink instead. Like there was a time when my son just refused to, take the time to eat breakfast, and we just made a protein drink that had, was really pretty good. It had a reasonable amount of protein and some fat. It wasn't high in the glycemic index. It wasn't too sweet. It was a little sweet, but we just mix that up and off you go, and that's way better than either nothing or just some junk food.
Right. Yeah, we've been making, for what it's worth, almond milk, low-carb chocolate protein powder banana shakes in the morning. And first of all, they taste like a chocolate milkshake, and they're really great for the whole family now drinks them every morning.
Yeah. No, they can be really, really healthy things. I mean, we have these green drinks in the morning which have kale and stuff in them too. I'm not sure how many kids will eat those, although some kids in my practice do.
Do they?
Yeah, they do. But I want to talk about, how you get your child to eat things maybe he or she doesn't want for breakfast. Because obviously children are used to having breakfast that they always have, and maybe they're used to Pop-Tarts, horrible, or pancakes with syrup or something. And so what happens if they don't want to eat what you offer? And this goes for any meal, goes for their whole diet. How do you get your child to eat what you want them to eat? So there's a wonderful feeding therapist named Ellen Satter, who's probably the #1 known feeding therapist in this country, and she has a great rule. Your job is to offer your child the food you want to offer at the time you want him or her to eat it. The child's job is to decide what and how much of it to eat. So it's really very simple. If for breakfast you don't want your child eating Pop-Tarts or Trix cereal, you no longer offer those. You offer, say, either oatmeal or whole grain toast with peanut butter or a drink. If he doesn't or she doesn't want those, then they don't eat. Period. You don't have to cajole or yell and scream. You say, this is your choices. And, you can modify your choices, according to what the child might like to eat, but you have to decide, I'm only offering healthy foods. And, there may be a few days where the child goes off without eating anything. It doesn't usually last. They're still better off than if they're eating junk food.
Yeah.
And almost always they will remember that they got really hungry. Then they'll decide to eat something. Sometimes you have to offer things a few times. But that's really the paramount thing, is that you, as the parent, have to decide what is okay for your child to eat on a regular basis. And then the child decides which of those things to eat.
Here's an example to that point. My son only will eat white bread. in your example, how would this person, Mary, address this?
Okay, it's really step #1: take all white bread, throw into garbage, and get it out of the house. Step #2: offer a good whole grain bread as one of the choices for the child to eat. And then if he or she doesn't eat it, then they don't eat, or they don't eat bread in that meal.
Okay.
So that's the kind of approach you need to have. And you could sort of transition it to, but that's where you need to go to where white bread isn't a choice. It's not even there.
It's not on the menu, basically. Right.
Exactly.
There are a number of questions. Maybe this would be a good time to ask them about specific foods. So, for example, people are wondering, is peanut butter okay? And if so, what about natural peanut butter?
Peanut butter is definitely okay. Nuts are really healthy things. I mean, and peanut butter is just ground up nuts. I certainly like to see people use peanut butter doesn't have a bunch of added salt or other kind of things in it. There's no reason for that. But yeah, peanut butter isn't the most complete protein.
Right.
So if your only protein was peanut butter, that wouldn't be very good, but there's very few people whose only protein is peanut butter. Almond butter is better in terms of a complete protein, but those are good things.
Okay. What about, here's one for you, Nutella. What about Nutella? The white bread kid also likes Nutella. Nutella, I have a feeling, is pretty much chocolate and hazelnuts, right? I mean, it's kind of...
Nutella, to the extent that it's hazelnuts, is not too bad, but how much sugar is in it is the question.
Yeah. What about sugar in general? And people are asking about
sugar in general.
Artificial sweeteners in general, yeah.
Yeah, so that's two things.
Right.
Hold on, I'm looking at Nutella again now that
Okay.
that you got me going on this. Let's see. It's made out of palm sugar is the first ingredient.
Ooh.
And palm oil, hazelnuts, cocoa milk, skim milk. This is probably not the healthiest thing in the world.
Okay.
It doesn't sound terrible.
Tastes good, but it's not great. Yeah.
It's only got 2 grams of protein. It's got a lot of fat, which isn't necessarily bad, but quite a bit of sugar. So not the best thing. It's better than some things. Okay, so what was the next question?
Sweeteners.
Artificial sweeteners.
Where do you come out about artificial sweeteners, I guess?
Okay, so there's some things like aspartame are terrible. Okay, you don't want to have those kind of artificial sweeteners. Those are known to have possible neurological effects. You know, those are just as bad as artificial colors and flavors. There's a couple of somewhat more natural sweeteners that are relatively okay. Splenda, which is sucralose.
Okay.
It's a kind of a non-absorbable kind of sugar, so it doesn't most likely has very little in the way of neurological side effects. It makes some people gassy though, because they have all this undigested sugar. So you just have to watch that.
Okay.
But if somebody tolerates a little Splenda, okay, that's okay. The other thing is stevia is a natural plant sugar, which as far as we know now is okay. It's pretty new people are using it, and of course sometimes down the line you find out, oh, that's not so good. But as far as we know now, stevia is relatively okay. And by the way, sugar is not the complete enemy. It's not like people have to eat no sugar whatsoever. I think people get a little kind of freaked out about that. A little bit of sugar is okay. It's just a question of how much. Because, as I said, all carbohydrates get turned into sugar anyway.
Right.
So it's a question of how fast it happens and, what percent of the meal is sugar. So, for instance, if you could get your child to eat a nice bowl of whole cut oatmeal, which is a great low glycemic thing, it wouldn't bother me if they put a teaspoon of jelly in it or something.
Okay.
Because there's not that much.
Or maple syrup or whatever, right?
Yeah, a little bit, right, exactly. On the other hand, if you take a waffle, which is when you make waffles, you have to grind the flour so thin that it becomes so fine that they become incredibly easily digested, high in the glycemic index, which means turn to sugar fast. Now you take a waffle and you pour a bunch of syrup on it, now you just have sugar plus sugar.
Yeah.
Very different meal.
Not really good for you.
But yes, so Splenda and stevia are the only artificial ones that I would look at. Okay.
Oh, we have a whole bunch of people who were looking at Nutella while you were and are posting hair-raising statistics, a teaspoon of sugar per, whatever. I mean,
it's not great.
Like
it looks to me like a sort of a
do well.
sweet that's got a little bit of almond nuts in it.
Yeah. Someone says, my child is really headstrong. Is some breakfast better than, a really healthy breakfast, I guess?
I would say a bad breakfast is worse than no breakfast.
Okay.
Because I think they will eat. If you give no breakfast, they will eventually come around and eat, or at least give a healthy drink. And that's where the other part of things is that I talked in my last webinar about behavioral methods for kids, and I used the nurtured heart approach as one example, and so you can use rewards as a way of helping them decide to eat well. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
So this can be food can be part of your behavioral program. I don't think it should be everything they eat should be like that, but if a child tends not to eat breakfast and they can get a certain amount of points or stars or whatever for eating something, for sitting down and eating something healthy, I think that's okay.
Okay. All right. On the breakfast front, one last request. People are saying, you have any other ideas besides oatmeal, protein shakes, and peanut butter toast? That seems to be where they are. And well, you said healthy oatmeal cereal, healthy cereal.
Yeah, healthy cold cereals are just
Cold
fine.
cereal.
How about eggs? Eggs are just fine. And then here's the other thing. Nobody has to eat breakfast food for breakfast.
Oh, interesting. You eat leftover, stir fry or whatever.
Leftover stir fry or leftover taco with cheese,
Right.
The idea of a breakfast food is just cultural.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing about breakfast foods that are healthier to eat in the morning than non-breakfast foods.
Right.
This
of course,
is the habit we have, which is fine. But so for instance, in the East, I mean, in Asia, people don't eat eggs or cereal for breakfast. They have pretty much what they have other times of the day.
Or congee, which is rice porridge, usually with pork or vegetables or things in it. Right.
Yeah. So it doesn't. If your child isn't fond of healthy breakfast foods, then she can have a little bit of healthy leftovers or sandwich.
Okay.
Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't. So that can open up this whole area of possibilities for what to feed your child in the morning.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you have a recommended, people are asking specifically about protein powder? A, I guess, is it okay to give it to children as young as 6? And B, is there do you recommend a brand, Whey?
Yeah, first of all, it's okay to give to kids as young as babies. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with protein powder. Many babies who, have some kind of digestive illnesses take protein powder for one thing or another. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. I like Garden of Life.
Okay, Garden of Life.
Garden of Life.
Well, they make vitamins too, don't they? I take their vitamins.
They do.
Yeah.
But they have some really nice protein powders. I have one made out of pea protein, which is nice, and there's different ones, and they're easy to use. And
okay.
One little hint. I often tell people, I guess people will probably ask this eventually. I often recommend this website called Vitacost.com to get vitamin supplements. I mean, and there's other ones. There's Herb.com and some other ones. But it turns out it's often really easy if you're comfortable buying online to find all the things you need in one place and get them shipped. And it's actually, this particular place is cheaper than
Vitamax.com?
Vitacost, V-I-T-A-C-O-S.
Vitacost.
Yeah. And they also have healthy foods on this website.
Interesting.
So you can get your Garden of Life proteins on this website, and you can look at all the different ones and see what they have and everything. So for some people, it's a lot easier than trudging out to the stores. Actually, it's cheaper.
Right.
So anyway, protein powder of Garden of Life.
Okay. On the Gatorade question, is there an alternative for an athlete? That's a question that's come up.
Water.
Water. What about, coconut
this
water?
whole idea that kids somehow need electrolyte replacement when they're going to a soccer game or something like that is complete nonsense. Certainly nobody in my generation ever took electrolyte replacements, and we played outside all day long without stopping. It turns out that it really, for only people who are doing really long, like marathon runners, really need electrolyte replacements. So really,
Gatorade is just another marketing ploy in the fact.
Yeah, except for like the really, really high endurance, athletes who do need it. Now, clearly, kids are going to want something sweet or flavored, and there's a lot of things out there that don't have the artificial colors and flavors that they can drink, and I forget the names of them right now, but there's lots of them out there. If you look in Trader Joe's or stuff that have a little bit of sugar or a little bit of flavoring and do not have artificial colors and flavors. But anyway, they really don't need electrolyte replacement to go play a game of soccer or basketball or something like that.
Lunch meats. People are concerned about your statement that, lunch meats are not good. One person, Ariadne, says she gives her son sandwiches all the time. Are there any lunch meats? I mean, I would think sort of baked ham that didn't have processed. I mean, when one says lunch meats, you're sort of meaning bologna and things that are processed, right?
Right, yeah. First of all, if you bake a ham, of course, it's just fine, or you make a turkey.
Or roast beef.
Or roast beef or whatever. But also, even all those things like ham and pastrami and everything, they come in without nitrates if you look for them.
Okay.
Now,
So it's really the nitrates we're talking about here, not
nitrites usually actually.
Nitrates.
So yeah, that's the problem, and you can find hot dogs, bacon, turkey, ham, pastrami, all of that stuff that doesn't have those artificial color preservatives in them. Trader Joe's carries them. Obviously, Whole Foods does. So they're going to be a little bit more expensive, but in Trader Joe's they're not too bad. But that's what I recommend. You can find anything, even like I said, bacon. You can find bacon without that stuff.
Interesting. Okay. A little more amplification about what glycemic index is.
Oh, good. I'm glad you said that.
How to calculate it and
talking about it more. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, what is glycemic index? Glycemic index refers to how you, and there's places you can look this up online. There's a really nice description in my book, but just to go over it again, it's a description of how fast carbohydrates turn into sugar, how fast they're digested into sugar in your stomach and intestines. So, for example, if you eat a piece of white bread, that carbohydrate is so highly processed and ground that your digestive enzymes can attack it really quickly, and it will turn almost immediately into sugar in your system. If you eat a really good piece of whole grain bread with lots of little bits of fiber in it and everything like that, it will digest much more slowly into your system. So that one's low on the glycemic index. Low is good on the glycemic index. So every single food has a glycemic index, and you can actually look them up. They're online. You can look up the glycemic index of any food you would like to look up. In general, the less processed the food is, the lower the glycemic index, especially for grains and things like that. Now, fruits, as a general rule, tend to be a little higher on the glycemic index, but it's really not predictable. Even like things like cherries and peaches are actually very low on the glycemic index.
Interesting.
Yeah, very low. It's surprising. So it's not always intuitive what's going to be high on the glycemic index and what's going to be low. Another thing that's low is beans are really nice and low on the glycemic index. Oatmeal is pretty low on the glycemic index. Yeah, so those are the kind of things. It doesn't refer to proteins or fats. Just glycemic index doesn't refer to those things, just carbohydrates. But
okay.
Now the other thing is, though, that when you eat a meal that has some fat, that has some protein, that has some fiber, that actually slows down digestion of the carbohydrate. So that's why it's good to have those things. So in a way, our low-fat grains are even worse than higher-fat grains. A meal with
yeah.
So it actually helps to have some fat in the meal to help slow digestion, like peanut butter, for instance. So that's the glycemic index, and you can actually look up the glycemic index of every food that you want to. An interesting thing is that you also have to think about something could be high in the glycemic index, but if it only has a few grams of carbohydrates, it doesn't matter that much as part of a whole meal. You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
It's if something has 30 grams of carbohydrates and it's high on the glycemic index, that's really bad. If it has 3 grams of carbohydrates, like cooked carrots are high on the glycemic index, but they really don't have very much carbohydrate. So when you look at it in terms of a meal, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
Some people call that the glycemic load, like the total amount of carbs in the whole meal. So does that sound clear? Or do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's clear. Yeah. A question about snack bars, Luna bars. Are there any of those kind of protein bars that are, in your view, okay to give kids?
Yes, I do. I think some snack bars are fine. You have to, Luna bars are pretty good. You want to look at the total amount of sugar, to make sure that they have a good amount of protein. And look what kind of carbs they are. I mean, is it just white flour? I mean, because there's some snack bars that are a little better than candy, right?
Right.
They're made out of basically flour and a couple of pieces of nuts and sugar. Well, that's not a good snack bar. Then there's snack bars that are just made out of ground up nuts and fruits and figs and all that kind of stuff, and they're really good.
Okay.
And somebody was talking, I think you mentioned somebody had a question about their child who gets hungry.
Right.
In the middle of the morning. I see a lot of kids with ADHD who need to eat frequently. I think they get relatively hypoglycemic in between meals. I don't think if you went and measured it, they'd have true hypoglycemia, but hypoglycemic enough to affect their behavior.
Okay.
And if you think about it too, like a lot of these kids are eating breakfast at 7.
Right.
And they may not eat lunch till 12 or 12:30. That's a long time to go in between meals. That's the biggest. After lunch, they have lunch, and then they get home at 3, and they have a snack, and then they have dinner, and then they go to bed. But that interval between breakfast and lunch is huge. That's when I say get a healthy snack bar and have them eat it in mid-morning. And you can write a note to your teacher and get your doctor to write a note and say, my child tends to get hypoglycemic. Please let them take 5 minutes and have a snack bar in the middle of the morning.
Right.
I've had parents say this made a huge difference for their kids.
Makes sense. Because kids definitely fall apart when they're hungry, and they may not.
Yeah, they do.
Not falling apart.
Many parents tell me that.
Hypoglycemia,
oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, my kid becomes a complete crazy nightmare, and then I get to eat something. It's okay again.
Just looking at these questions here. Fruit. People are wanting to know what fruits do you recommend, and also what you're thinking about bananas, which I guess are high glycemic index.
First of all, I recommend all fruits.
Even bananas?
I think fruits are, I recommend it, yes. I mean, fruits are healthy foods. Now, of course, like anything else, you can overdo fruits, but they actually are quite healthy foods. And again, it's, so would you want to just give your kid fruit for breakfast? No, because, some of them are high glycemic index and they're not very filling, and, they won't really keep up your blood sugar very long. Protein tends to keep up your blood sugar much more, but, fruits are part of a healthy diet. By the way, strawberries, peaches, and cherries all are low glycemic fruits.
Strawberries, peaches, and cherries. Great. Okay.
Yeah, and I really do recommend organic fruits if you possibly can, though.
Okay.
Not because so much of the nutrition, though, that may be a little better, but the pesticides.
Oh,
non-organic fruits and vegetables have lots of pesticides. We know that pesticides are associated with more ADHD.
Interesting.
In one study, the kids they looked at pesticide levels in many hundreds of kids, and those with higher than average pesticide levels had twice the chance of having ADHD.
Wow.
So to the extent that you can, buy organic fruits and vegetables. And there's also a list of the top 10 worst and best fruits and vegetables in terms of how much pesticides they have. Mm-hmm. And so that's all over the internet. It's really not hard to find. And I would definitely go with the ones that are, if you have to buy non-organic fruits and vegetables, get the ones that are lower on the list.
Okay.
Okay.
Turning to the question of gluten and dairy, some questions about is a gluten-free diet a good idea? And I guess leading then to your other question about your other issue about a diet to test your child's sensitivities, a restriction diet. Could you talk some about those issues, gluten, dairy, and how to determine whether those foods or your child is sensitive to those foods?
Yes, I will. We talked about this some in the last webinar, but I'm happy to do it again. So aside from the whole nutrition issue, some kids are sensitive or allergic, but mostly just sensitive to certain foods, certain very healthy foods, like dairy, wheat, or gluten, corn, soy. And sometimes when you take these foods out of the diet, they can have dramatically positive effects. I mean, I've had kids, not always, but many times, and I've had kids whose hyperactivity just vanished when they went on an elimination diet and found the food they were sensitive to, or became half as much of a problem or 75% less, or or even 20% less. That would be good for most kids, right? So unfortunately, there's not a good way to determine if your child is going to be sensitive to these foods without actually removing the foods. If a kid tends to be allergic as well as have ADHD, those kids who have chronic hay fever, eczema, asthma, skin problems, all that kind of thing, then I will actually test for food allergies. And some of those kids actually have true food allergies, and then that's a place to start. But otherwise, in children who don't have those allergy issues, mostly they don't have food allergies either. And I usually just do an elimination diet where I eliminate a certain set of foods. There's a lot of ways to do this, and you really should work with a nutritionist or somebody who knows what they're doing a little bit. But basically, I use a multiple food elimination diet where I eliminate gluten, dairy, soy, corn, nuts, and eggs all at once. And then if there's then we bring them back one by one. I eliminate them for a few weeks and then bring them back. However, the two biggest ones that really get in people's way are gluten and casein, dairy and wheat. And sometimes people just want to eliminate those two, and that's okay. Or they even want to just eliminate one. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but the idea is that certain kids, they really react to the proteins in certain foods. And if you get rid of them, they can improve their symptoms.
Interesting. For kids who are on gluten-free and dairy-free or even vegan diets, are there any foods that you recommend? There's a couple of people on the webinar whose kids are in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of foods. I mean, it depends on what it depends on what they're not eating, but let's say they're on a gluten-free and dairy-free diet. Well, you just have to look and see, in terms of nutrients, eliminating gluten doesn't eliminate any nutrients, essentially. I mean, there's really nothing in wheat you can't get from anything else. It's just carbohydrate. Dairy has a few things. I mean, dairy has protein, so you want to make sure your child has enough protein, which usually isn't a problem. In our country, unless you're vegan, protein is usually not an issue. Even if you're vegan, you can you can get enough protein. But it also has calcium, so I often recommend a calcium substitute, a calcium supplement, if somebody's dairy-free. It just makes it easier. But in terms of actual foods, boy, these days there are so many great products for gluten-free people. I mean, there's a gluten-free bread, there's gluten-free cookies, there's gluten-free pasta of varying kinds. That's terrific. I don't know how wide across the country this is available. There's something called Udi's bread, UDI, that they sell in San Francisco, which is delicious gluten-free bread. But there's others around, and then there's lots of gluten-free processed these days that are based on rice or other things. So the gluten-free issue is usually it's a problem, but there's gluten-free pizza crust out there.
Right.
For people who are dairy-free, there's lots of like you said, you can have almond milk, you can have coconut milk, you can have almond yogurt, you can have coconut yogurt. I'd stay away from too much rice milk. Rice milk turns out to have a fair amount of arsenic in it.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, there's a whole controversy about how much arsenic there is in actual rice these days. It's kind of a new thing that's come up. Rice as a plant tends to concentrate arsenic. So depending on where it's grown, it could be a problem if you're eating tons of rice. But I wouldn't eat a lot of rice milk. But anyway, the one thing that's really hard for people who are casein-free is cheese.
Yeah.
There's really not good casein-free cheese. There's some cheese you can melt.
Some soy cheese and,
Yeah, or there's rice cheese. And those are okay to, melt onto a pizza or something. But actually to sit down and eat the cheese, that's the one thing.
Yeah. Oh. Before we turn to vitamins and supplements, about which there are a number of questions here, just 2 points. I just want to tell the group listening that someone posted that Udi's, I guess, is now at Trader Joe's around the country. That was one point that someone made.
Excellent.
And the second one is that there's been a class action suit against the maker of Nutella because they, I guess, have positioned it as a health food, and the group won a settlement yesterday, so a big settlement.
All right.
So on the
This is
Nutella
great. I
front,
love learning as I do these.
Yeah, someone else posted that interesting news. I mean, I wasn't even aware that Nutella was being perceived as a healthy food, but apparently that victory was made in court yesterday, so maybe we'll see some change in that advertising.
Great. By the way, they're suing Kraft now, too, trying to get them to take the artificial flavors and colors out.
Really? Out of macaroni and cheese?
Yep.
Wow, that orange is so egregious. They could at least tone it down if they're going to do it. So what do you think are the top supplements? I mean, I guess one question is, what is a good multivitamin dosage, and what do you think are the most important supplements for an ADHD kid?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. So number one supplement is fish oil, omega-3 fatty acids. Number of studies have been done on fish oil and ADHD, and the overall message is that fish oils are moderately effective for treating ADHD all by themselves. In fact, one what we call meta-analysis, where they looked at all the studies together, showed that fish oil was about 40% as effective as stimulants, which is big.
Wow, that's big, yeah.
So that's the number one. Omega-3 fatty acid supplementation to me is the number one thing that I would do. The second supplement that's important is just a good multivitamin. And I can't tell you a dose of a multivitamin, but what I can tell you is one or two multivitamins that are pretty good. Carlson's makes a good multivitamin. Child Life makes a good multivitamin. Nature's Plus makes a good one. Nordic Naturals, the people who make the omega-3s, they actually have a Nordic berries, which are pretty good. So there's several, good multivitamins for ADHD. You just want to make sure they have, all the vitamins in it. They have, usually the good ones have some good minerals too, and you want them to not have sugar and artificial colors and flavors. I mean, Flintstones has artificial colors and flavors in them.
Wow, right. Well, there's a flurry of questions here. About 20 people just posted almost immediately to say, one, what dosage of fish oil should their child take?
All right, here we go.
Two, the relationship of one of EPA to DHA.
Yep.
Those are the two questions.
Yeah, those are very good questions. I'll give you my answers. But I have to have a caveat, and the caveat is nobody really knows what exactly the dosage for omega-3 should be. We usually talk in terms of, 1 to 2 grams of fish oil, yet in one study they gave kids 16 grams of fish oil without much in the way of side effects. Huh. So we're still looking at what really might be the best dose, and nobody is really sure about the EPA-DHA ratio. But the studies that have been done, it seems like a higher amount of EPA than DHA is what works.
Right.
Usually the EPA will be twice or 1 1/3 as much times as the DHA. So that's what I recommend, a product that has more EPA than DHA.
Okay.
Number 2, what's the dose? The dose I use, I base on the amount of DHA and EPA, not the amount of just omega-3. So you have to look at each product. So don't just say, okay, I'll get a gram of omega-3, because that could have very little EPA and DHA, or it could have a lot.
Got it.
I go for the ones that have the most EPA and DHA per oil, because you have to take less, which is obviously an issue. For little kids coming up to about 7 years old, say from 3 or, well, you don't treat many kids with ADHD, before age 4 or 5. So, let's say the 4 to 8 group, I usually use about 1,000 milligrams total DHA and EPA, moving up to 1,500 or so as they get to 9 or 10, and then over that, 2,000 milligrams total EPA and DHA. Somewhere in there. Now, obviously, kids are different weights at different ages.
Right.
But that's kind of a ballpark for how much I use. And I'll tell you right now, I know you're going to ask what are the brands that I like.
Yeah.
There's lots of good brands I like. 2 that I think are really good are Carlson Fish Oil for Kids and Nordic Naturals.
Okay.
Now, one more thing. You can't use those little gummies or chewables. Well, you can't.
Oh, yeah, there are questions about those, yeah.
I don't recommend them. Why? because
artificial flavors.
no, well, most of them
No?
don't have that. No, but the problem is they have very little DHA and EPA in them. So,
Oh,
for instance, like most of them, they have about 200 total in 4 of them. So, therefore, to get 1,000, you'd need 20 of them.
mm.
So they really have very little of what you want in them. And A, I mean, you're going to really want to give them that much sugar and have them snack on 20 a day. And B, it gets very expensive.
Right.
Most of those things only have 120 of in them in the bottle. So you would be taking, you'd be going through them every like 6 days. So
Wow.
you just can't compress fish oil that much.
Right.
So gummies and chewables those little chewables don't work very well. You want to get a liquid for the littler kids who can't swallow, and then they have capsules for the older kids. And they do have some half-size capsules, by the way. Omega-3 capsules are pretty big, but they do make half-size capsules. Nordic Naturals does.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, for a lot of kids have problems with those pills. A couple of just follow-up questions on omega-3s. Is it okay to combine them with stimulant medication? Is one question.
Absolutely.
Cheryl? Okay.
Completely. There's actually no nutritional supplements that I talk about that can't be combined with stimulant medications. Okay,
great. And then what about flax oil? Is it, for vegans, is it just as good as the question is?
It's not just as good. It could be as good. Flax oil has the precursors to DHA and EPA in it. It has omega-3s. But your body has to make DHA and EPA out of the flax oil. And some people don't do it very well. The ability of the body to convert the linolenic acid, which is what's in flax oil, to EPA and DHA can be limited. Now, so some people do convert it well, some people don't. We don't have good ways of measuring it now. I can't just order a lab test for it. So that's why we don't think flax oil is as good. However, if somebody's a vegan and just refuses, just really, from a moral point of view, does not want to eat fish, then I'll have them take flax oil and take a lot of it and hope they convert it.
Right. Right. Person asked whether you just repeat that general dosage guideline, and asked whether it's
1,000
really based on weight. Is it based on weight, or is it? I guess it's just Yeah,
it's sort of based on weight, size. Again, generally 1,000 in kids up to around 8, and generally 1,500, say, in the next 2 or 3 years, and 2,000 after that.
Okay. All right.
But it's really hard to give too much. I so often have parents who I think are taking 1 teaspoon of fish oil, which has, say, 1,300 EPA and DHA, and then, oh yeah, we've been giving them a tablespoon. Which now is 3,900, and it's fine. I mean, people generally don't have side effects from it.
Interesting. So not to worry about going too high.
Exactly.
Couple of other specific items here. Caffeine. I guess a couple of people have posted that that's actually been recommended to them for children with ADHD.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So caffeine is a stimulant, and it's in the same chemical family as the other stimulants, like Ritalin and Dexedrine. And so it can have some calming effects on or helping kids concentrate. Problem is that in the doses it takes to do that, sometimes it makes the kids jangly as well.
Right.
But it's sort of very sort of politically incorrect to recommend caffeine for kids.
Yeah, here's someone two people
but
who posted that caffeine was recommended to them to help their child who couldn't take stimulants for whatever reason. Yeah. Right.
I remember very distinctly a high school kid I took care of who stimulants made him completely crazy, could not take any of them, and yet he was able to drink caffeine, and he would sort of nurse one of those monster drinks through the day. And it got him through school. He said he could concentrate. So, it's not necessarily a terrible thing to do. I mean, it might help. Green tea has caffeine. It's a little better for you than coffee.
Oh, that's interesting. Right.
I want to say one more. People asked about other supplements. The next two important supplements are iron and zinc.
Iron and zinc.
Iron and zinc, I usually check levels, and you don't want to give iron without checking levels. Okay. So you need to check a ferritin level, and this is discussed a lot in the book, but ferritin is a measure of circulating iron, and a lot of kids with ADHD are sort of low in that.
Okay.
But that you have to do with a doctor. Zinc I check as well, but it is okay. Zinc can be helpful in ADHD, and it's certainly not dangerous to give like around 20 milligrams of zinc to children with ADHD. So those are the next two important supplements.
Okay. That's great because no one has asked about iron and zinc, and there are lots of questions about magnesium and vitamin D.
Oh, yeah. Vitamin D, I recommend because so many kids are deficient. I usually check a level. We don't know of any definite association at this point between vitamin D and ADHD.
Okay.
There's no literature that I'm aware of that examines that. However, vitamin D is really important for all kinds of things, including mental health. So I think everybody ought to be having their vitamin D checked, because here in San Francisco, where it's foggy a lot, 3/4 of the kids I check are low. They're deficient in vitamin D. So if you're not getting blood drawn, you can certainly give 1,000 milligrams of 1,000 international units of vitamin D very easily. It won't hurt anybody.
Without worrying about overdosing.
Without worrying at all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty hard to overdose on vitamin D. But
okay, so it sounds like vitamin D, iron, zinc checking sounds like, okay, those are all really helpful. I mean, I'm sure most kids, doctors are not thinking to check their iron and zinc levels.
No, a lot of people think doctors have checked their iron because they check the CBC.
Right.
That doesn't check. That checks how much iron is in your red blood cells, but many kids are iron deficient without being anemic. So just the CBC doesn't cut it. Magnesium can be helpful for kids with ADHD. I don't usually check a level because it's always the level in the blood is usually good. I did it for a long time, and everybody's was normal, so I thought, this is kind of a waste of time. But that doesn't mean some magnesium doesn't help, because sometimes it does. It can be quite relaxing and help with sleep as well.
Yeah, but sleep is an issue that's been raised here. It's obviously a very common ADHD symptom. Whether or not, in my experience, whether or not kids are on stimulant medication. Are there any supplements that you recommend? Melatonin, I guess, is a classic.
Yeah. So for sleep, I mean, the first thing is what we call sleep hygiene, and that is making sure the time around bedtime is conducive to kids falling asleep, which means the electronics have to go off like an hour before or 45 minutes before bedtime, maybe a bath, things have to quiet down, lights go down a little bit. That's all sleep hygiene, having this sort of routine to really slow the child down so that melatonin can start being produced so they can go to sleep. But sometimes even that doesn't work, especially, as you said, with the medication. So I like melatonin. I think it works really well, and I think it's safe. Valerian is an herb that can be helpful for sleep. 5-HTP is another nutritional supplement. It's a precursor of serotonin. So there's several things that can be good. There's a product I like called Valerian Super Calm, made by Herbs for Kids. And it's a combination of valerian, chamomile, and passion flower. It's got a whole bunch of really calming herbs. And that's really safe to give to smaller kids before bed.
Interesting. Valerian Super Calm. That's great.
Yeah, made by Herbs for Kids.
Okay, Herbs for Kids. Question here about the iron and zinc and vitamin D. People are asking, I guess the answer to this I know is to check the levels, but the question they're asking is, aren't those covered in their child's multivitamin? I guess I think your answer is going to be
not enough.
No, not enough. Okay.
Not enough for ADHD.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, I think this has, been super great. I don't know if you have a last word of advice. There's still lots of folks on here who say, I have an intransigent child. He or she lives on 3 foods,
Right.
hot dog, pasta, and eggs.
I think I said what I think about that, but I'm also aware there are a small percentage of kids who are just so stubborn that it is very difficult to change their diet. And, then you can, often professional help, there are feeding therapists out there and that kind of thing. But I really think in those kids, if you use a behavioral method like a nurtured hood approach or something like that, I still think you can make progress. There's there's not very many kids who will absolutely not eat.
Right.
You don't give them the
He's so
bad
stubborn
food.
that they won't eat anything, right?
Right, but it can be very difficult. I don't want to be
Yeah.
blasé about it. I mean, it
No
can
question.
be really difficult. And sometimes this has to be a process, not, okay, tomorrow you're eating,
No
changing
weight.
your whole complete diet.
Pasta tomorrow,
Sometimes it has
right.
to be, okay, we're going to fit this one food into your diet or remove this one food now and then move on later,
Yeah, yeah. And of course, there's also, I know I had this in my daughter, texture sensitivities play into things too. There's a lot of sensory integration issues with textures, but so it does get complicated, no question.
Yeah, but you could work, I mean, there's in any set of textures that they will eat, there's healthy foods and not healthy foods.
Right, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Newmark.
You're welcome. Well, thank everybody
Everyone, don't
for being
forget
here.
to check Dr. Newmark's book. I think it's really important source with lots more information. Again, ADHD Without Drugs, A Guide to Natural Care of Children with ADHD by Sandy Newmark, MD. And thank you again for tuning in. Thanks, Dr. Newmark.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.